Let's Get To presents Go Go Astros, a focus on H-Town hardball.
Garcia has thrown 63 pitches. The 0-2. And Rodriguez lifts it in the center, right at Dubon, makes the catch, and that is the ball game. The Houston Astros are headed back to the ALCS as they sweep the Mariners in the division series, winning a thriller 1-0 in 18 innings. A game that will go down in Astros history as one of the most exhilarating, heart-stopping postseason games they've ever played.
And with that call, we are here to talk about your American League Division champions. Is that even a thing? I know it would be in high school if we had letter jackets. We would all be wearing, the patch that said district champion or division champion on our sleeve.
We'd have like 18 of them.
I mean, when you've won 6 of these in a row, do the Astros care that much? I mean, how was your weekend? Because the Astros had a good one.
Well, it's funny because I actually took your advice and was relatively zen about this game because I had a Halloween party that night and I had the game on. And in fact, guests were like, why isn't it on the bigger TV? And I was like, well, we've got an ambiance thing going. And so then it really turned into me stopping the party at periodic moments to announce how the game was going. But, it was good. And I think, I think they definitely, clearly they celebrated, I think particularly with the way in which they won the game, right? Like if they had just gone out and won 42-9, they might not have. But I think in this one, they definitely made it special. And it was definitely something that put me in a better mood.
And for those of you unaware and somehow living under a rock for the last 72 hours, we are talking about an 18-inning playoff game to clinch a 5-game series for the Astros, in which neither team scored until the top of the 18th inning, which there's all kinds of records in there.
It's also a lot like my dating life. I didn't really score till the top of the 8.
Until you were top of 18? Yeah. Brian, how was your view from the East Coast?
So my life plan on Saturday was to run errands and do stuff in the morning and the early day, to watch the Astros at 4 and then switch over to the LSU Florida game. I ended up 2 screening with the LSU Florida game on mute, watched all 18 innings and was able to switch over to the LSU Florida game for the final inning completion by Florida and 2 kneel downs by LSU. So, from a standpoint of did my teams win? It was great. From a standpoint of did I have a healthy mental experience for 18 innings? No, not at all. And part of how I know I didn't have a healthy mental experience is I really, 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 I extra wanted them to win. And we got to about the 12th on because it was like, I don't want to watch another baseball game tomorrow. Full up.
Yeah. I mean, I think I was similar. I was so jaded by not wanting to see Seattle win that I stopped watching us pitch. And I missed out on great. We're going to get into it in just a second. But game day was how I tracked pitches. And as soon as I saw the third out recorded, I would flip Hulu back on and watch us bat, which I could have skipped all of that. At some point, probably in the 15th inning, I was like, we're either going to play tomorrow or we're going to play Wednesday. It doesn't really matter what I do. That stopped me from doing nothing that I was already doing. I also figured out that I could have driven to the airport, gone through security, made the 4-hour flight to Seattle, got into Seattle, got into my hotel, and walked over to the stadium in the time that game was played. That was a long game. Gentlemen,
it reminded me of my brother-in-law got married in May of, I guess, 07 or something. And we were all listening to the Longhorn baseball game. We were down in Corpus Christi and it went 25 innings and we were all drunkenly like, hey, let's just get in the car and drive. It was definitely that kind of moment.
100%. The other people who knew they had a really long day were our pitching staff. And honestly, through the whole series, and I want to talk about that and get both your takes on it, but especially in Saturday's game, 8 pitchers were used. We allowed no runs over 18 innings. Lance McCullers was dominant in his 6 innings, and there were a lot of heroes in between, but I think you can't overlook what Luis Garcia did for the last 5 innings of that game, coming in not having pitched in, I think, 12 days prior to Saturday.
Yeah.
Honestly, if we could get rid of this bum Justin Verlander and his 13.5 ERA for the postseason, we'd be doing all right.
Well, to me, I think it goes to what Brian pointed out in our very first episode of the season and what we've been talking about. I actually got strangely confident when Garcia got in and Seattle was still having to run through pretty much a reliever an inning or just a little bit over that. And I think it really shows off the depth of that pitching staff, where people who don't know the Astros as well as I do that are at our party that were kind of now rooting for them tangentially to me were like, how many pitchers do they have left? And I was like, well, it doesn't really matter. This guy can go 5 and then the next guy can go 5. So really and truly they were lined up for that marathon of a game it ended up being. And I think it really was just a real testament to the main strength of this team is that it's not just depth at the pitching staff, it's high quality depth.
So Brian, to you, is this what our pitching staff is, or was this just an incredible performance?
It's a little bit of both, right? Because, okay, you can't expect a team to shut out a team for 18 innings. And in the last 32 innings of the ALDS, they gave up only 3 runs. Okay, that's a little much here to expect, right? But this team gave up fewer runs than any team in the history of the Astros franchise. By the way, not a team that played in the Astrodome and not a team that got to throw pitches to a pitcher 2 to 3 times every game here, right? In a better hitter's park and with a better, with the DH in every single game for the first time ever. You know, they had the fewest runs. Oh, and some, zombie runners thrown in there who get to score, right? It's not an environment as conducive to previous, right? Which again speaks to something we talked about at the beginning of the year and I talked about through. This is a team that's been centered on its pitching and defense. And that's the part that we can expect. The 7 runs in game 1 were the shocking part. The 2 runs in game 2, well, they give up about 2 to 3 runs every game on average. So we should expect that. The 0 for 18 is a little much, but thank goodness they did it, right? Because they absolutely had to do it. But I think another point to make here, and I pointed this out in my Substack article yesterday, is the way Dusty Baker managed the Astros relief staff was, I'm just going to put a guy in at the beginning of every inning. I'm going to have confidence in him. I'm not going to press anybody a second inning because I have to play. I may need to play tomorrow, and I don't desperately have to win this game. But also, just importantly, I can pass the baton. I know the relievers pass the baton to each other because I have confidence in each and every single one of them. They have all been really good. I mean, think of the 2 guys he chose not to use in innings he knew that would happen in the regulation innings. Brian Abreu, who pitched the 10th, and Ryan Stanek, who pitched the 11th. Both have ERAs under 2. Both have FIPS under like 3.10. And those are the guys you were electing not to use. That's how deep this pitching staff is.
Do either of you have any insight as to why it took us till game 3 and late in game 3 to see Ryan Stanek pitch? I mean, ostensibly, he has been our best reliever this year from a lot of performance metrics.
The only performance metric that he's the best reliever in is ERA, which obviously is important because it's about runs scored. But if you look at the fundamentals, he is our 5th best reliever, and they used him like our 5th best reliever. But again, if your 5th best reliever is Ryan Stanek, you have a really good bullpen.
Yeah, it still doesn't explain, though, 11th inning of the 3rd game, when he was definitely a regular leverage guy. I wonder if maybe he was late to the clubhouse and Dusty forgot he existed. Maybe seems
right. Dusty never forgets an old ball player. It's the new ones he has no idea about.
Right.
I mean, he could have been hanging around with Lance McCullers and caught whatever mysterious illness Lance apparently had and wasn't affected by.
I hope everyone did. But I do think, Brian, I think you're right. I do think you have to give a tip of your cap. Dusty did manage the bullpen with patience. There was no panic. And I understand there's no panic because you're not playing. Even if you play tomorrow, you still have an advantage over Seattle with the way they have to use theirs. But even in game 1, when the game was out of hand, there was still, I think he did a really good job of being steady with the bullpen, which has not been his reputation his whole career.
Yes, absolutely. And again, he has lots of really good resources, so it's hard for him to make a bad choice. I mean, I want to give a shout out in particular to like Hunter Brown, right, who has 1 month of major league experience and now 3 and change shutout playoff innings, and he looks like every other Astros pitcher that is a really high quality pitcher who doesn't look like the moment's too big for him.
Yeah, and whatever's going to happen in the next few weeks, I think James Click also deserves a little bit of credit for what that bullpen is and how it was constructed and the number of weapons. If you go by what Dusty's reputation has been throughout his managerial career, you've almost taken away his bad options, which makes him a better manager, right? If all you have to choose from is good bullpen relief, good bullpen pitchers and good starters, you're not really going to go wrong in most of those scenarios. There was no Brooks Raley on this team. Switching gears a little bit, the hero beyond the bullpen for Saturday's game was Jeremy Pena. Now, on September 22nd, 1994, there was an Astros shortstop who was born. He was drafted 1-1. His name was Carlos Correa. He provided some insight as to why he didn't re-sign with the Astros on his TBS hosting gig, which was kind of interesting, but showed a little bit of maturity. But somehow 3 years later, on September 22nd, 1997, there was another Astros shortstop born. And that man's name is Jeremy Pena. Is that cosmic fate? Coincidence? He certainly wasn't drafted as high.
So scouting people born on September 27th is the new market inefficiency. I expect James Click to be all over that.
I just think there's something in the water when you when you get drafted as a shortstop for the Astros, because obviously maybe Pena's home run lacks a little that television drama because it wasn't technically a walk-off. So we don't get the full Correa effect that we got from a couple of his memorable home runs. But really and truly, first of all, the ball was not flying in Seattle. He muscled that thing to center field. So just kudos to him. But I'll be honest, if you remember at the beginning of the year, I think I was the one guy on the show who was skeptical of the idea of taking a veteran team into the season with a rookie shortstop. And I was completely incorrect on that, and happily so.
I will own my part of that. I also was not so much from a skill set standpoint, but I believe he had something like 37 at-bats above Class A ball coming into inheriting, basically being handed a major league shortstop starting position. And he certainly he's had his slumps. He has the Altuve Biggio. So if you're looking for a lineage, he has the Altuve Biggio inability to lay off a slider. Although he did manage to get on with one of those this week. And that was a big deal because that brought Alvarez to the plate. But what are we seeing with Brian? What are we seeing with Jeremy Pena? Is this is a cornerstone player? Is this a step in his evolution? What did you see?
Yeah, I think the thing we've seen watching Jeremy Pena on an everyday basis is, for a rookie, this is a really mature dude. This is a guy who, and I think that's part of the insight on why we had reason to be skeptical, right? For the reasons both of you stated, right? Part of why I think the Astros were confident is they understand his personality, his work ethic, his style much better than we do on the outside. And so I think part of that was a bet on things we see now, right? That this is, again, dude goes about his business on a daily basis, right? Looks the part, is calm and sure. And when he makes a mistake, doesn't seem to affect him as he moves on. What's the future for Jeremy Pena? Well, he could be the best defensive shortstop in the American League right now. I think he should win the American League Gold Glove. He probably won't because, of course, voting is heavily based on how well did you hit and do I remember you from 4 years ago.
And how long did it take Carlos Correa to get recognized for those skills?
Yeah, right. It's better today than it used to be, but still. But his calling card will always be his defense. He's got really good power, which again we saw on Saturday night, because again, balls were not flying out of that park, except they were fooling Brian Anderson, the play-by-play guy, a whole lot. But a lot more balls were going deep than they actually were. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt that they seem better off the bat than he was wish casting some more action into the game. Either one's understandable. But his difficulty has been his inability to force pitchers into the strike zone. He got better at that in September. It'll be something to monitor over the rest of his, over the next couple of years. But hey, we have a regular at shortstop for the next 4 or 5 years. after having had a regular shortstop for 6 years, this is a pretty good thing.
And, for a longtime Astros fan, having a shortstop that was worth anything is kind of a big deal because it was pretty much Dickie Thon and then Carlos Correa. So that was, you had luminaries such as Adam Everett and Tim Bogart and Ricky Gutierrez manning that spot, and it has been a wasteland.
I'd like some love for Craig Reynolds, who held on the Astros shortstop job for a decade for some reason.
I think it was the perm, frankly. You have great hair, you're going to get jobs. I'm sorry.
I certainly respect that argument.
Speaking of wish casting, which you brought up, it is Monday. We do not know who the Astros will be playing on Wednesday when they open up the American League Championship Series. It's going to be one of the American League champion or American League Central Division champion Guardians. Almost said it, and or the your favorite and mine, the New York Yankees, who managed to hold on to the AL East title. What do we have? We're at kind of the best. I'm sorry, we're at the best scenario because they have gone 5 games. I think the only thing better is that there's a 35% chance of rain in New York today.
Yeah, I saw Brian's tweet about that.
Yeah, and so my rational side is they will do everything they can to get the game in, but my wish casting side is, downpour tonight. I have an outdoor activity tonight that's going to get canceled as a result of it, but we'll move past that. Downpour tonight, play the game tomorrow, and we got to enjoy 18 innings. I think it's time that Guardians and Yankees fans get to enjoy an 18 innings.
At least, maybe 20. The Yankees like 20 records.
Let's play 2 in one day.
If you're a New York Yankees fan, you're going to be satisfied with just tying an Astros record. No, you've got to beat it. You're going to play at least 19. 20 for good measure.
I completely agree. Completely.
But of those 2 opponents, what are we hoping for? Or does it matter?
I try to avoid the hoping thing because whatever happens whenever I start to hope for a team I immediately hope that, when Seattle won, I was like, man, maybe it would have been better if Toronto won. So I'm very much like that. I do think that there are certain matchup stuff that I'm sure Brian can break down even better. We already know that the Astros seem to match up pretty well with the Yankees this year. And I don't know that they've gotten anything but worse since those 7 games. For me, Cleveland's a bit of more of an unknown, but I do think it might not matter only in the sense of, to your point, they're either going to play today or to play tomorrow. They're going to need, we did the math on Facebook, when we were talking, Andy, we're not going to see Garrett Cole, right, till game 3 at the earliest. Yep. They're going to need a couple of games to get right. So when I say I'm not sure it matters, it's not bravado. I'm just not sure in this particular instance it matters.
Yeah, from a numbers standpoint, the difference in the odds, move 2 or 3 percentage points. So is that meaningful? Yeah. Is that a big deal? No. The Yankees have been a better team on the season. They won 99 games. The Guardians only won 93. Right. But the Guardians had a much better last month and a half of the season than did the Yankees, and really a second half of the season than did the Yankees. So they're probably, if you just include that in, just as good. The couple advantages that the Guardians would have if they won tonight, they are lined up to have Shane Bieber, their best pitcher, in game 1. Whereas, as James pointed out, the Yankees wouldn't get Garrett Cole until game 3. The Guardians have a much better bullpen than the Yankees, including, I think, generally consensus of best reliever in baseball right now, Emmanuel Clase. At the end, he'll definitely pitch tonight. The Yankees, of course, have, Yordan Alvarez is really good. How good is Aaron Judge? He's better than Yordan Alvarez. And they have what should be a better lineup than the Guardians, but it's a lineup that has been slumping and hasn't provided as much depth throughout it. And if you look at it, it's particularly with DJ LeMahieu out. We'll see if he comes back, but less deep than you think it should be.
I also, and this may just be the fact that the Astros went, 4 wins, 3 losses against, 4-3 against the Yankees, or 5-2 against the Yankees.
5-2.
the Yankees lineup, at least in the regular season, seems more manageable.
Yeah.
You can pitch around Judge should you choose to. Why more teams don't, I have no idea, but maybe they're afraid of getting chastised on Twitter by Michael Kate and some other guys. Which kind of brings me to my next question. If the Guardians win tonight, does Rob Manfred just cancel the playoffs and make the Dodgers the champion? Because we are in a situation where the 100-win Braves are out. The Yankees could be out at 99 wins. The Dodgers at 111 wins have been eliminated. So you are potentially looking at a championship field of the San Diego Padres, which I think is the 5th smallest market in baseball, Philadelphia Phillies, the Houston Astros, and the Cleveland Guardians. Is that the worst case scenario for Major League Baseball?
Well, I think we can at least look forward to hearing Julia and Blummer and Todd on the call, because I'm not sure they're going to even care to broadcast those games nationally. So good news for us. I don't know. I mean, I made the joke about them putting a spirit store out in front of the MLB store in New York for the remainder of the season. But yeah, it's definitely a worst case scenario for Manfred and company to have 4 teams that largely do not have a national following playing in this series.
Yeah, I mean, look, Fox, who's going to broadcast the World Series, cares about ratings. And the reason we have such an elaborate playoff setup is because that's where the revenues are. The more games they put on, including they added games to the wild card round, the more games they put on TV, the more that ESPN and TBS and Fox will pay them. So, yeah, in the ideal world, they would have liked it to have been Yankees Dodgers, because those are the 2 biggest TV markets in the country. They would hate Yankees Mets because it's only one TV market. And we saw that when we had Yankees Mets. On the other hand, it's the World Series. Plenty of people will watch. And, and frankly, I'm a fan and not a owner. So I don't care what the ratings are as long as it's actually aired.
Well, but I think the question was about the ratings, and I pushed back on that. I mean, the fact is 2017, we had one of the biggest, the World Series had one of the highest rating World Series of all time. 2019 was one of the lowest. The common denominator is the Astros. The different denominator is the Dodgers versus the Nationals. I do think it matters because I think it points out to something Andy and I have been discussing for years, and that is the foundation of the MLB is not as strong as the foundation of the NFL. The NFL, I think, truly doesn't care who makes the Super Bowl. I think there's a reason why Manfred and company care. And yeah, I mean, we're, as fans, we don't care, except that, like right now, because of how the ratings and what the ratings do for the playoff games, I have to find ways to watch TBS. You would never see an NFL playoff game on TBS.
You might see a meaningless regular season game on Nickelodeon, but even that has a plan around it.
And slime.
Yep. Slime and a plan.
Not just Bob Costas either.
Well, it brings up a really interesting point to me, because there was a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth when the Dodgers were eliminated. I want to talk specifically about the Dodgers in just a second, but Joe Scarborough, former U.S. representative and current husband to Mika, I don't know what his role is anymore, coffee talk host, was
that's that guy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I actually kind of like that guy.
Yeah,
Wow.
But just crying over the weekend that the baseball playoffs are unfair because the Yankees looked like they were going to get eliminated, and the Dodgers were eliminated, and the Braves were eliminated, and it's just you're not getting your best teams competing. And I'm struggling to understand how that's any better than the NBA, where the 1 seed rarely wins, the NFL, where the 1 seed doesn't win 50% of the time, college basketball, where the 1 seeds hardly ever make it to the Final Four. College football is maybe the one where you can say, okay, those 4 teams are the best 4 teams. But even then, there's an argument about the 5th or 6th team that gets left out. I don't understand why baseball, and specifically 2 teams that we're talking about, are put on this pedestal that if they're not playing, it's not worth playing.
The real curious thing to me is this is no different than the playoffs have been for basically all of our adult lifetime.
1969.
Yeah, was the one 1969, right? Where
That was the first 5-game series.
all right. And I believe the Orioles team that year won 100 and some odd games and they lost, which should be the first, should be a clue that the playoffs are a crapshoot. They lost to the Miracle Mets, right? Who weren't as good. And we've seen this across time, right? Particularly as we've gotten into more rounds, starting with the wild card rounds in the mid 90s, where, I love the 2004 Astros. They weren't as good as the Cardinals that year. But the playoffs are a way to determine who the champion is. And they're a very exciting way to do that. And we get lots of dramatic games. And I really hope there's great drama tonight, regardless of who wins, just because it'll be fun to watch. 18 innings would be awesome, right? The difference is this. In baseball, we all know that a short series doesn't tell us who's better, but we do have a really good idea. So is the number 1 seed in football better than the number 2 seed? Well, they often won one more game, which could have just meant that, we lost that game because our kicker pulled a hamstring and we had to send out the 3rd string punter to kick a game-winning field goal. Otherwise, we would have been number 1. The margins are so small. In baseball, they play 162. We know the Dodgers are really good. We know they're better than the Padres. They just weren't for these 4 games. And so it's a bigger deal in baseball where the difference between what goes on in the regular season, where we have clear definitions of who's better for the most part, and what happens in the playoffs, which are a bunch of randomness over short series that don't tell us who's better, but are a heck of a lot of fun to watch.
I think you said the quiet part out loud, Andy. Like, we have all acknowledged, both in our private conversations, that oftentimes in baseball, the best team doesn't win the World Series. It's why I don't ever want to see division championships go away, because that is the one measure to reward to being good for over across 162.
More patches for Letter Jackets.
Exactly. But I mean, look, all 4. I think one of the reasons that makes this show special is all 3 of us have been Astros fans for decades, so we still get excited about the little things. And I think little things but
82nd win.
I think, well, right. But I think the audacious part of it is the only reason why this is getting run is because it's about the Dodgers and the Yankees. No one gave a good golly darn when the Astros didn't win the 2019 World Series, even though they were by any measure the best team in baseball that year. You have to go into the playoffs acknowledging that the playoffs are the playoffs. They're not designed to reflect who's been good all year. They're designed, like Brian said, to decide who the champion is. And sometimes it's not going to be the team with the most wins.
Because otherwise you go back to only caring about a National League pennant, an American League pennant, and then that's the World Series, and that's it. And even then, it's still a 7-game series where ostensibly anything could happen. A little bit less margin for error than a 5-game series, but hell, when the White Sox threw the World Series, it was an 11-game series. Maybe we go back to that. Really prove who should win it.
Someone did a study and said, like, to get the level of the top team winning at the same rate as in the NBA, Major League Baseball would have to adopt a best of 73 format. It's inherent in the game, right? That, remember when the Astros got swept by the A's this season?
Yep.
Yeah, that was lousy. That sucked. It was only 3 games and they came back to it. Thank goodness they didn't play like that for the last 3 games.
And the sheer number of games, that's basically like losing half of a quarter of a football game.
Yep.
We talked about the Dodgers a little bit, and I said I don't want to push this off. The Dodgers tears have been fairly delicious over the weekend, and I'm not somebody who just revels in other fan bases' misery. But the one there was a bunch, but the one that really stuck out to me, I think it was posted yesterday. Jake Reiner, who used to be a sportscaster or an anchor here in Houston at the KPRC affiliate, is now a broadcaster in Los Angeles. Grew up in Los Angeles. If the name Reiner seems familiar to you, it's because he's Rob Reiner's son.
Oh.
Seems like a normal enough guy, and still until you start talking about the Dodgers. His tweet over the weekend, I'll read you a snippet of it. What a complete and utter disaster. This fan base deserves so much better than what we've endured the entirety of the Dave Roberts era. If there is
a problem with that word, deserves.
I stopped at deserves because Brian, I think, put it best.
I put the GIF up from Unforgiven. Deserves got nothing to do with it. That was my reply to Andy.
But it's just it's mind-boggling to me that, and I know it's the relative youth on things like Twitter, of people who don't have perspective, that are young, that literally, if you're a Dodgers fan, you've only known them winning division championships and falling short in the playoffs, frankly. I mean, that's what has happened over the last 10 years. But this idea that a fan base deserves better because they live in the right zip code is just bizarre to me. But beyond that, what problems exist in Dodgerville? Because there is unrest when it comes to what Dave Roberts has not done over his tenure. There is unrest in having the highest payroll in baseball for a number of years in a row and signing all-star teams literally every free agent class and still falling short. What's going to happen there in 2023?
Brian,
Let's start with Brian. We started with Jim a lot today.
I mean, the simplest answer is they're going to win 100 games again and win the division, and we'll have this conversation again next year. The more complicated answer, right, is they have some issues with the depth of their rotation, and that was evident in the series against Padres. They have some young guys who they kind of sort of have some confidence in, but have been bringing along slowly. They have Clayton Kershaw, who's at a point now in his career where he's certainly thinking about ending it, and he's on one-year contracts, and he's kind of, contemplating more than just baseball, which good for him. He's certainly, he certainly has the right to do that in general, and has pitched great for years. But in general, they are a really strong team with really good prospects. So they will probably be good again next year. The simple answer is no one has cracked the code on how to defeat the randomness of the postseason. And as much as it's awesome that the Astros have won 6 straight American League division series to reach the ALCS, right? That is close to it's a record for the AL. Mm-hmm. We get to be for Aaron Judge here. It's an AL record, so it counts. Okay. Yeah. But mostly because it's a really impressive accomplishment, right? It's a way to sort of put scale on it. Only the Braves have done this, and a couple of these they didn't have to win a division series to do it. And the others, they got to beat the Astros. So anyway, too soon, I know.
Which they did.
Yes. It's also, we won this series against the Mariners by 4. The run differential was 4 runs. Okay. If Robbie Ray throws a competent pitch, they were playing yesterday. Mm-hmm. If Luis Castillo threw a good pitch rather than a bad pitch, probably Yordan doesn't hit that one out there, right? It's small margins, and a lot of the breaks went our way this series, and part of that is talent, part of that is playoff experience, and part of that is the dice just turned up in our favor, and I'm happy for all 3.
Yeah, I don't have very much to add. I mean, I think I have a certain heartburn when it comes to LA based on my post-college career. So I just think it's a plastic city that doesn't actually believe or love anything that it claims to believe or love, and believes everything should be handed to them. And so to that, I say, suck it.
I don't know that I can add anything else. I do echo Brian's thoughts, though. It is coin flips. And the fact that the Astros have won 6 coin flips in a row to get to the ALCS that many times in a row, for me, is just cosmic retribution for 1981, 1986, 2000, or 1997, 1998, 1999, 2004, and 2005. And 2001. I forgot about that one. And a couple of those in 1998, you could argue prior to 2019, that was the best team that had never won a championship. That was an incredible team that ran into Kevin Brown pitching twice because of the scheduling. So I don't feel bad about it, but it is completely random. And that's kind of why I was very zen about Saturday's game. It's like they're going to score or we're going to score at this point, and we're either playing Saturday or we're playing a Sunday game or we're going to play on Wednesday.
Yeah. And I do think I know we talk about the random, and obviously it's random, and obviously a lot can happen. I do think that you also, in certain situations, make your own luck. And I bet you if you hooked up the Astros dugout to a heart monitor and the Mariners dugout to the heart monitor, one of them is going to be steadier than the other, and it's not Seattle. And I do think that matters, particularly in a game in baseball where you can't let yourself get too high or too low emotionally.
Hey, these things matter, but they are small margins. You're
We're
absolutely
talking
right.
about a game of vengeance. What
Like lineup construction.
all margins are small in baseball, though. So you put enough small margins in your favor, you have a big one.
All right, so let's see where the margins are. Without knowing the opponent, I want to know what your ALCS predictions are. And I'll go ahead and go first. I think the Astros actually win this, whoever the opponent is, in a fairly easy fashion, 4-1.
I will echo your 4-1 and say that Justin Verlander gets a pair of victories in both game and one in game 5, redeeming himself.
Yeah, I'll say Astros in 6, just so I don't know. I think Astros in 6, and it will feel comfortable. And I do. I know we probably shouldn't be talking about like possible World Series matchups yet, but I'm nervous about the concept of an NL East team versus hearing about Juan Soto's age again. So either way, talk about margins, Brian. Those are not margins I like.
I'm on the one hand, I'm biased because I could go to a game in Philadelphia. On the other hand, my wife, who's from an East Coast rabid, sports town, has said, "Yes, we're nuts, and the Yankee fans are nuts, but I'm worried about you going to Philly."
Wow. Okay.
All right. On that note, we're going to wrap this up for this edition of Go Astros. I'm Andy. That's Brian, and our gracious ISP, for lack of a better term, Jim, is over there in the beautiful jacket. Go Astros.
It's the best uniform in Astros history. Go Astros.
I'm hoping the event at the synagogue doesn't get canceled tonight so I can honor the best Jewish player in baseball right now, and piss off the Yankee fans there. Go Astros.
Juan Soto is still 23 years old. Go Astros.